What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Coachable Podcast. I'm so honored and excited to have Candance Van Dell joining me today. And for the past 10 years, Candace has used her extraordinary gifts of intuition and insight to assist people from all over the world in their own inner healing and awakening from and to their inner truth. And I'm so excited to dive into what that means, her journey, and give you guys a taste for the work that she does, because she offers a new spiritual perspective and she teaches spiritual fitness tools, which I love that terminology, because we really do. On the Coachable Podcast, we're all here to learn how to grow and to do things better. We need to get not just in physical shape this year, not just to get mentally strong, but use spiritual fitness tools that I hope she can bring to us today. And through her workbooks, she's been able to facilitate empowerment and a consistent connection to the truth self. She also teaches 4 online courses that facilitate inner child healing, tribal wound awareness, emotional wound integration, and next level shadow work. So, Candace, thank you so much for being here. I'm really honored to have you and can't wait to chat. How are you doing today?
I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be really fun.
Yeah, I know. I love social media for the fact that it brings the right people into my life right when I need it. And I know this is one of those connections for me. I can already kind of feel that synergistically and vibrationally. And I'd love to just start this conversation by asking, what's up for you right now? What's going on in your life? How has the new year started for you so far?
I got to say, thank God for 2022. 2021 was I think for most people, but specifically for me, it was the most packed in growth year of my entire life. I went through the hardest things I've ever gone through, which I think most people. And ultimately, I didn't believe it at the time, but now looking back, and I was telling my friend last night, I was like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm really happy again. And I went through such a difficult period of thinking, gosh, this is just so much. And you realize that even I loved who I was a few years ago, but now I even love her more. And I didn't realize it. I'm like, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to change. I like who I am. And what you realize is sometimes you have to get rid of things, or things have to be taken or removed from your life to really plant the correct things, heart-centered things, empowered things in your way, in your path, so that you can literally kind of elevate from ego living into this heart-centered reality. And that was my year last year. It was like ego dead, soul taking over. What the heck? Yeah. I'm surrendering. It was nuts.
Yeah. And that can be like an intense process. I mean, that was a lot of 2021 for me as well. And it can be disorienting a little bit, and how do I get my footing again in this new reality, in this new world and reality that I'm creating intentionally, as I let go and release what is no longer serving me or isn't the identity that I want to carry into, this new year. I think we all have that opportunity. At the beginning of the year, we're much more intentional about thinking about those things, even though it's available to us at any point. But what were like the big lessons for 2021 that you took away that maybe you're stepping into this new year with? What were the most like potent things that you felt like the year taught you?
I think it's really interesting. I always say my work is my teaching. It's like I have to go through something before I teach it. I kind of love it because then I have such confidence about it because I know it works. So this past year, I did, I would say, my deepest shadow work. I was taking the parts of me, the powerful parts of me that were in the shadow that I was kind of, band-aiding with other things. Those things had to go, and I knew it. And it was almost like this realignment with the heart. Like I said, really, I didn't have any more ability to half-ass something or to fake myself out or deny it. I was like, this isn't me. This isn't working. Shit. I've got to change it. What is me? And I will say one thing that I thought was incredibly lucky is I had such an amazing support system while I was going through a divorce and a move and major changes and all these new fears that were coming up that I was like, no. And now I'm so grateful because you realize you can do really hard shit and be okay. And when you realize that, you start to live by looking through the fears instead of looking away from them. Now I'm like, okay, give it to me. I know I can handle it. And what most people think is I am not capable. Let me stay in my comfort zone. Let me stay small. Let me stay upper limit issue. No, here I am. I'm like, I'm going to shine. So give it to me, whatever it is. And that's kind of what this year did, is it was like this, all the scary shit all at once. And I realized it really isn't that scary.
Yeah, because it really is. It's like when we're in avoidance and running from the things that we're scared of, it feels so overwhelming and scary, and we feel like we can't face it. And then when we actually go into it and we actually look at it and we draw out the worst case scenarios and we're like, really, what's the thing I'm scared of here? We feel it's almost like this huge giant kind of shrinks. Have you ever seen that picture of like, it's like the little kitten, and then its shadow is like this big lion.
The lion.
It's like the fear feels huge, but then when we get into it, it's actually like much smaller than you think. Yeah.
But see, that's one thing that I like to teach people too in my groups and stuff, is that resistance to pain is actually what's causing you pain. If you just go into it, you're like, oh, I just got to feel it to heal it. I say it all day long. Just get real about how you feel. And it will heal. But no one wants to, because we're so afraid of protecting this meaning we attach to it. This is happening because I'm not enough. We're so afraid that original wound is going to be validated from external sources that we don't realize the external sources are just mirroring what we believe. Yeah. So sit in it. Have the courage. I mean, it's easier said than done, but I've done it, right? You've done it. You have to sit in the courage and do those scary ass moves and say, okay, what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if I become homeless? That was one of my things. I was like, what if I become homeless? What if I lose this or that? Then when you realize, okay, maybe I've done my worst case scenario in my mind, I can fix that. I can change that. I can do that. You realize the capability that you are the source. The source is not outside of you. We attach like power to our partners and our work and our authority shit. And then you're like, wait, I'm kind of the source of my reality. What do I want to create? Holy cow, permission slip to do that. Yeah. It's nuts. It's great.
Yeah. Well, and that can be such a empowering moment, and also it can make us just kind of, I remember for me, when I remembered for the first time, I am the creator of my reality. I'm the common denominator in everything I've ever experienced, and thinking in that moment how much power I had been leaking and giving away to everybody and everything for my whole life. It was like I was standing before all of these opportunities and all of these spiritual assignments, really, where I just been like dishing out my power to everybody. And it's this, over the years, it's been like a recollecting and reclaiming that, of bringing it back home and saying, actually, I'll take that back. Actually, no, I'm no longer gonna, allow this situation to dictate how I feel, or this person to confirm this story for me anymore. You mentioned 2021 was a lot of shadow work for you. For those listening who might be new to this work, like, how do you define shadow work for maybe a beginner?
Oh, great question. So the word that I use, which you just use, is power. It's, I deal a lot with the golden shadow. A lot of people don't talk about it because they think shadow work is the dark stuff that you think is bad about you. But most of us are afraid of our shine. We're afraid of our power because we grew up in an environment with insecure parents or emotionally immature parents, or let's be honest, we grew up in an emotional dark age, and society doesn't really encourage you to own your truth. It doesn't. It says, let's conform and then you'll be safe because you belong. And me growing up feeling like I was different, I was like, I kind of like what this is. I'm just going to own it. But owning your truth as a child makes you feel weird, makes you feel like, why aren't they honoring that? And so we put a lot of our power in the golden shadow, and then we project it onto our partners. Oh, I need someone powerful. I need someone this. And then we never find out our own potential. I did that. I did it all the time. And then I started noticing, wait a minute, I'm better at that than they are. Wait, I should try that. I want to do that. I want to do it. Yeah. But we're so afraid of that because we think if I don't need anyone, I'll be alone. That codependency, right? Yeah. So if I don't need anyone, then what? What if I'm in my power and I'm all alone? I'm going to die. It's that childhood, that inner child issue of I need to connect to be safe and survive. But as we get older and realize that's just the inner child perception, we need to upgrade it and reparent it through trauma work and whatnot. We start to realize that owning our power and being free is actually not scary. But most people I coach are they don't even know it. It's unconscious. They're deathly afraid of being free because being free is scary. Oh my God, then what? I'm like, well, you're used to your little prisons. It feels safe, secure, and certain. Uncertainty is our number one fear. So let's just jump into that fear, like we said at the beginning.
Yes.
So for me, I just jumped in and I was like, fuck it. I would rather just be whole me and alone, which I know won't be the case, than half me and always kind of unfulfilled. And so as soon as I became whole me and I was like, oh my God, that's in my golden shadow. That's in my golden shadow. All these things we think are scary. You start to own them and you realize what they give you. They give you your own abundance. They give you this creative outlet that you've been waiting for someone else to give to you or tell you is okay. And you become kind of the authority of your own reality. Yeah. And that's shadow work. Shadow work is, I love the dark. I love the light. I know myself. So when someone says something to me that I don't like, I'm fine with it. Opinions don't matter because I already know. And I already love it.
Yeah. And I think, for every bright light, there is a shadow with that's cast. And it's what I've learned, in my journey over the past few years is it's not about getting rid of the shadow. It's going to be there as a byproduct of being a light as well. It's about integrating it, not like casting it out or exiling it. And you mentioned that for so many of us as children, our truth is not validated. It's not celebrated. It's not allowed, so it's conditioned out of us. It's a lot of times based on just in the need to survive alone. We learn it's not safe to be who we are. It's not safe to be myself. So I have to change or conform or distort myself. How do you differentiate belonging? Because belonging is one of our like critical needs as human beings, to belong and to connect, as you mentioned, and attachment or codependency. How do we see those differently? That belonging and connection, how are those different than codependency and attachment?
So connection and attachment are the two key words. The first thing I'll say is the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. It becomes choice. Integrity. Who am I? What do I want to create? Knowing you have the power. When we talk about, societal ideals versus universal laws, for me, I had to lift up to a higher perspective to understand that, of course, I belong in the world. I may not do everything catered to society, but society is created by people with opinions, not God, not source. So I'm going to have a false God, or I'm going to lift up to a higher God and not care if I fit society, but care that I fit my purpose. Because if you want to fit society, 9 times out of 10, you're not living your full purpose. You're just not. You're not. And that's hard for people to get until they've become extremely successful. And then they find me, they're like, something's missing. I'm like, right. Because you're living in alignment with these measures that aren't actually measuring to your truth. Yeah. So codependency is I can't be me unless you like me. Or I can't be, right? So what I like to teach people is I'm going to be me regardless of you. Because people treat you, here's the other thing I should mention about worth. Worth is a big piece here. Yeah. So many of my clients don't even know that they are saying this. It's programming. But they think that their worth is based on how they've been treated or how they're being treated. And I say, why would you take the over responsibility of saying these people are doing this to me because of me? They're doing that to you because of them. They will do that regardless of you. So what you have to understand is, I had a client tell me this week, she's like, well, I'm looking for external validation or confirmation that I'm enough. I'm like, what are you talking about? You just gave all your power away to some circumstance, some condition. To live unconditionally and to be in your authentic power and your abundance is to know. The example is this. If someone says to me, I don't really like your videos, I'm like, cool, I don't really care. I love them. But if I'm insecure, I'll be like, oh no, should I delete it? What should I do? See the difference? Yeah. Living externally or internally, that's codependency or interdependence.
Yeah. Do you see, because I see this with my clients, that there is a gap when we start to go from recognizing, okay, I have been outsourcing my power, my worth, everything to my partner, my friends, society, culture, parents, etc., and to how I should be, to, okay, how am I going to source that within myself? And the gap can feel really, really wide for people because they've never, they haven't developed the self-trust within themselves to actually believe themselves.
100%. That's the biggest hurdle.
So how do we start that to bridge that divide?
It's really easy, simple, but profound. I always say, get real about how you feel so you can heal. You have to be honest with yourself and what you feel. That is your authentic self. I had a client on Friday. She was in my group. She said, I don't even know who I am anymore. I feel like I get it and then I lose it. And I said, okay, to find out who you are in the moment, how do I fucking feel? I feel pissed that I lost myself. Okay, without judging myself, I'm upset that I lost myself. The truth is I lost myself. That's who I am right now. Yeah. But see, we think we should be something else, or we start to judge where we are, and we forget that exactly how I feel and where I am is going to lead me to self-awareness. Instead of saying, I should already be somewhere else by now, you're already abandoning yourself. Yeah. So the resistance to where you are is the self-abandonment. That's keeping you small. What we have to do is say, this is where I'm at, and I love where I'm at. And then the next thing is, how do I feel? Okay, I kind of want to go that way. I'm going to go that way and see. It's this discovery that we're so afraid of, because we're afraid if I'm really, listen to this, if I'm really being who I am and how I feel and what I need, I'm afraid that it'll show up as not enough. So I'm just going to keep one foot in and one foot out and always be in doubt and never really know, just in case I'm not going to be enough. That's what we all do.
Yeah, it's like the prisoner who's standing behind the prison wall, but there's an opening on both sides. Like I could technically just walk around this wall, but to do that means I have to take responsibility.
This is the biggest thing.
Yeah, that is so scary because a lot of us, we like to stay small and live in that story of, I'm stuck. I don't know how to move forward. My life, I feel like I'm not living up to my purpose. But then you give people the anecdote to that and like, actually you have this like path forward, but it's going to require you to fully be responsible for your life, for your happiness, for your actions, for the results you're getting. And we almost would rather stay in that small space of like blaming the world or blaming other people or like playing that victim role, because it feels so scary to be the main character in our own stories.
Well, if you think about that one step further, it's a fear to shine because we never had the mirror. Yeah. So it's this uncertain identity, and people are so afraid that I'm not going to be enough because what we've been told our whole life is, I don't get you, that's wrong, no. So we think our sort of go-to is, I should probably stay here because at least I know this and I'll be safe, but I'm really not fucking happy. But I don't really know what it would be like if I'm happy. And the biggest thing people tell me after I work it out of them is they're afraid to death to be themselves and then lose themselves, or be happy and have it taken away. When we're children, we got our identity taken from us by not being loved for authentically who we were. So we're afraid to death to love our authentic selves, because what if it gets taken away again, and then some authority outside of me or life is going to do something to make me realize I never deserved it in the first place. And then my biggest fear is confirmed that I'm not deserving of my own shine. But when you really think about it, who the hell can take that from you other than you? You are the one deciding that they're right about that. And if you're not deciding, you're like me or you, who are like, I'm not going to decide that. I'm going to go do it anyway. And you guys can just watch and learn, because I'm going to create a new path. And this is what I think I am. And what you think I am is not what I am, because I'm me. Yeah. But we give this power and this authority over to these people that know us better than we know ourselves, but they don't.
Yeah. I'll tell you personally, from just like a really personal standpoint, for me, the deepest level of unlearning that had forced me to come face to face with an old paradigm of God, of who I thought God was, that God was mad at me, that God, if I didn't do enough, I wouldn't get into heaven. This is why I've been baptized like 4 times, right? I've been saved and resaved over and over again until I realized that I had externalized to God and made God as judgmental as I am. And I had projected the human condition onto to God, and that's not who God is at all. But I had to do some deep unlearning around, because for so long I had been taught that I was only good in God's eyes, and if I acted a certain way or did the things that God wanted me to do, and if I didn't, I was wrong. And so for me, my deepest fear was being a bad person. Yes. And for me, the triggers that come up is something that reinforces that, Tori, actually you're not as good of a person as you think.
That's right. Are. That's absolutely right. We are so alike. And the interesting thing about it, I had what I would call, it wasn't even a quarter life crisis. It was an existential crisis when I was 16 years old, and I really found God. Mm-hmm. But I was so confused because what I learned as a teenager, this was hard to get and have no one get it too, is that we project our parents onto God, because our parents are our gods. They are our false idols. They are our false gods. Our parents are perfect, so it must be me. There's something wrong with me that they're not loving me the way that I need. So when I do something wrong, God's rejecting me. Oh my God, God hates me too. No, God's not rejecting you. You're just projecting your parental inner critic onto this big source that is not actually accurate, which is why it hurts so much. Mm-hmm. That negative emotion that comes over is saying, you're wrong. That is not the reality. And then what's exciting is you get to go into the truth of reality, which is also very hard for people, because then they start seeing their parents for who they are, wounded humans. Sure. And then they're like, oh shit. And that's the step that people get stuck in. They don't want to be free from that dynamic or that paradigm. When I developed my shadow work course, it's about seeing your mother wound and your mother's wounding, your father wounds and your father's wounding, the tribal wounds that you have taken on that aren't fucking personal, but you can't see that unless you see your parents for who they are.
Yep.
It's so enlightening.
It is. And I just think through my own progression with this and with my clients, the next step for so many people is, I feel wrong for judging my parents, or I feel wrong for seeing my parents as imperfect. So then there's a whole nother hurdle of, okay, my parents were perfect and they did no wrong, to actually they were doing the best they could. They were doing the best they could, and they were actually imperfect people have been deeply affected and wounded by the result of that. And it's a releasing that judgment, that actually I can still have love and have connection and see the truth for what it is.
Yes. So this is a really important point, because you have to keep going to the next level. People don't know how to. That's why you have guides, like us and others, is that people will say, no, I feel so bad. My parents did the best they could. I'm like, I get that. But you have to look at what they went through. It's not their fault either. We're in an emotional dark age. I always say in my videos, I don't fucking blame parents. Now listen, it's not our fault that we're wounded, but it's our responsibility to heal. And our parents didn't have the tools. They didn't have podcasts and books and shit. They didn't really have that at that time. Now they're starting to get it. Do you know how many 60-year-olds, 80-year-olds that I coach that are like, oh my God, I fucked up my kids. I'm like, you're awesome. It's not your fault. But then they'll bring their kids in. And it's just so awesome to heal it by saying, it's not your fault. You don't have to take this burden on. I understand that I'm wounded because you are, and only hurt people, and I get it. Am I pissed at you because you messed up my child? Like, yeah, but it's not really your fault.
Yeah.
And I understand, I'll tell you, this is kind of personal, but whatever. I was talking to my mom, not too long ago, about how I was like, God, my whole family abandoned me at one point. And she goes, Candace, my whole family abandoned me too. And I was like, of course it did. Because this is just the way that it is,
Yep.
You become that. And so when I heard her say that, I knew that. I was like, fucking compassion drops in. It's not like I hate you, you're crazy. It's like, of course you did the best that you could.
Yeah.
And that has to be enough, because that's all that it is.
I did a lot of work in 2021 around my mother wound, who I lost my mother in 2018 to ovarian cancer. So I don't have her here in the physical to repair or to have these conversations anymore. But I did a lot of work around this, and to see the lineage of the feminine in my family, and how I really feel like my soul chose to come in and to intercede for this ancestral line, and to bring in that divine feminine again, to heal that, because for so long, it just goes all the way up my family. And it's when you start to see those patterns, you're not surprised. I have had so much compassion, but something I teach in Coachable University and with my students too is it's not because we are compassionate with our parents and with their parents and so on. It also doesn't mean we can't grieve and rage and feel all of the feelings that are associated with the pain that's occurred. Yeah, those are like we can fully hold space for ourselves to have that process without making them wrong.
So this is so important too, because if we deny the inner child the grieving of the trauma, it gets stuck. It never gets healed. It's not like, oh, I'm going to grieve and I'm mad at my parent. It's I need to grieve to give my inner child the validation of what she went through. So many people are like, well, I'll just use myself as an example. For so many years, I would deny the fact that what caused me pain was even causable. And that was the pain. And then I started saying, no, that literally traumatized the shit out of me. Yeah. I need to look at that as really traumatizing so that I validate inner me so she can love me back to integration and free me from this bullshit. I'm like, oh, I feel bad. That shouldn't hurt me. It does. It hurt. Whether it's perceived abandonment or real abandonment, it was an experience. Mm-hmm. And we have to validate and grieve all of this shit so that we can come back to self and not live as separated individuals who are like basically separated from our own selves the whole time, disassociating from the truth of what we experienced. If you're disassociating from your own truth, how the hell are you being truthful in the world? You can't.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to your point. It's like we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves about what's true for me, because the biggest, when I first started my spiritual awakening and quarter life crisis, whatever you want to put a label on it, like I remember thinking, there was such a long period of my life where I would go to bed and I would convince myself of something like, I am in the right relationship for me. I am happy. This is good. You know what I mean? Or it's like, if I'm having to talk myself into it, if I'm having to tell myself I feel a certain way, I don't, right? And it felt, so crossing that threshold from pretending, not just with myself, lying to myself, but lying to the world about how happy I was, how like excited about life I was, how strong I was, to actually saying, nope, I don't feel that way. That's not reality. That's not real. That was a pivotal point for me. And I agree. It's when I have done this work, I have kind of this ritual that I do when I can sense a trigger is coming up. I'll ask myself, what does this feel like? Mm-hmm. Where else in my life have I felt this way? That familiarity is how I know it's mine. And it's not someone else's, right? This is actually my energy that I need to shift and move. And this is my trigger that's pressing on something in me. So where else did I feel this way? What does this remind me of? And I write out, like on one side of the paper, all of the thoughts I'm having that are typically berating myself. Like, you're not a good person. You're this, you're that. Like, no one takes you seriously. You're a joke. And then on the other side of the paper, I write the truth. And it's not like this swinging pendulum of like, oh, I hate myself to I love myself. It's just like, oh, you're a human being. You're allowed to make mistakes, or you know what I mean? Yeah. There are so many people around you that love you or what have you. But I do that, and then I allow myself to grieve or cry or whatever, rage, whatever is coming up for the me at the age that thing started. So I asked myself, how long has this been with me? Like, what age did this maybe start? And then if I was 7 years old, I cry as if I'm my 7-year-old self, not my 30-year-old self, right? Then my 30-year-old self can come in and be that parent. But I'm not crying like, if I'm doing that inner child work, it's not from the place of who I am today. I really allow myself to do it from the little girl that thought mom had abandoned her, but she was really at work late, and I cried myself to sleep that night, That's and right. Those are those small T traumas that so many of us dismiss, and we're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. At least I didn't I wasn't sexually abused, and we start to compare our traumas to other people, and we invalidate ourselves again in the same way it kind of happened as children. You teach a lot about trauma bonds. How do we begin to identify those within ourselves and take that path towards healing?
First thing I want to, this is kind of interesting. While you were talking, something really popped up for me. And it's interesting that, we forget, and people don't teach this, you can have attachment trauma with self, trauma bond with self. I saw one of yours pop up when you were talking. So forgive me.
Yes, please. Speak. You have permission to speak into it.
Well, when you said, I am in the right relationship, I'm so happy, my thought was, why does she need to be happy? And what hit me was her trauma bond to self is, I can't be bad or wrong, so I have to appear happy. So that was your block to your authenticity. So you kind of fixed your own trauma bond to self. But what I would say is, when we have these vulnerabilities, we're not allowing ourselves to be our authentic self. We pick partners that are the thing that we're not. That is a trauma bond. When I'm coming from a place of not being whole, or I'm coming from vulnerability, or I'm coming from a shadow that I'm not owning, we get into these trauma bond relationships that feel intensely exciting and holy shit, like everything I ever needed. And then you start to have anxiety because you realize you've compromised a huge part of who you are to make that fit. And it's not who you are. It's who you are in the moment, so you don't have to do the work, so you don't have to feel the pain, so you don't have to feel not happy. But the reality is, it's just a bandaid to the work. Trauma bonds are the hardest thing in the world, in my opinion, to break as well. I've done it, and it's like, holy shit. You go through like drug withdrawals, it feels like. You feel like you're making the wrong decision. Oh my God, I'm in love with this person. No, you're not in love with the person. Your ego is in love with the attachment. And so often when I teach people this in my emotional rehab course, they're like, excuse me, what does a healthy relationship even look like? That's the problem. Because when we're in trauma bond, which means we haven't healed our inner trauma, we don't know what it feels like to love contently or healthfully. We think that's boring. We think that's not enough because it's not intense and it's not like healing the pain. And then we get mad at everyone because they're not healing the thing within us. So trauma bonds are literally, you asked me at the beginning what's going on right now in my coaching community. Trauma bonds. We're all talking about this because what's happening with highly sensitive people and empaths is we're being asked to stop this shit so we can actually come into the authority that we came here to do and let go of this false confidence and these false fake love shit and really love ourselves enough to then recognize, oh, you don't love me as much as I love me. I'm not putting up with that behavior. Discernment and boundaries will shift your trauma bond. But you have to be educated on what the hell it is and what you're dealing with so you can see it and be like, oh my God, that's not healthy love, but I really want it to be, but it's not. Okay, I know that's a no. And go through the withdrawals that are going to take months and months and months and love yourself back to yourself. And then this is what happened to me. I've had 2 huge trauma bonds in my life. I'll take time away. I'll go no contact, which is mandatory, by the way. The 1 foot in, 1 foot out doesn't work, just keeps you half bonded. And then after months of doing your own self-work, which no one wants to do, you got to do it. You'll go back, you'll see the person, you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? I don't feel that bond anymore. I see them for who they are, not the fantasy I projected onto them so that I could be saved by someone.
Right.
I saved myself.
That is
so it's self-saving.
Powerful.
Yeah. That heals you.
I say this all the time. Avoiding hard things makes life unavoidably harder. And what I know you can attest to this, like Candace and I would love to tell you is there's a shortcut to healing and that we can avoid the hard parts. But no one can do this work for you. Like nobody. You have to be willing and almost get to a point where you're so sick and tired of living at like 40% full of your life. Yeah. And you're like everything. And there's just this dullness, like everything's at like a 40 or 50%. And we only have, maybe we start to listen to podcasts like this and we become increasingly more aware that there are people who are living their lives at higher vibrations, at higher levels. And we start to get curious. You're like, oh, so this isn't all there is? Oh, so this, just because I thought this was normal doesn't mean it's actually normal. because we've normalized our trauma. We've normalized these codependent patterns and these survival strategies. And then we think this is what it's like to be in love, or this is what love is. This is relationship. This is what it means to be an adult or be a responsible adult. And then you and I come in and we're like, yeah, actually that's not the case. There's a whole new way to do it. And it just opens and expands us into so many more possibilities. But I have so much compassion for people that are walking that path for the first time, that are like, I feel like I don't know who I am, because who I thought I was, I'm realizing isn't actually who I am, but I still don't know who I am at the same time.
Yes. Yes. Well, so that space in between is something I talk about a lot in my monthly membership group, because these are people from all over the world, from all different ages, who are going through the same thing. And what it is sort of stripping the false self and then identifying the true self, and then that shit in between where you're like, and what I try to tell people is, yeah, that happens to everyone, but that's the time that we have all these creative opportunities of saying, who do I want to be? Instead of saying, what's God or life going to direct me to? That's the time to stop the codependent pattern of show me who I am. And instead discover who I am by following what I feel. And this is the problem. People don't want to follow what they feel when what they feel is negative, because they've been blamed for their negative emotions their whole life. So I'm doing something wrong and I'm bad. You can attest to this because I feel negative. No, sweetheart, you feel negative because your thoughts are not in alignment with the higher self. So it's time to shift those thoughts, to love yourself. We're so afraid to give ourselves credit. We're so afraid to say we're enough because someone's going to tell us we're not. I don't give a shit. How about everyone tells you, I always tell my clients this when they're ready, pretend that everyone is telling you your biggest fears are true. You suck, you're bad, you're not enough, you're unworthy. Just pretend that and sit in that. Okay, and what's the big deal? It's just a false evidence appearing real. It's false. It's who cares? So you have to sit in the fact that all my worst scenarios are happening. What would I do if that's true? Does it really change anything about what you feel? No, it really doesn't. But people don't take the time to be like, let me imagine it. They're so afraid to imagine it.
Yeah.
Just imagine it. And then once you imagine it, you're like, okay, I think I'm fine and I can direct my life the way that I want to.
That's the ticket. That's the ticket. As you were saying that, I was kind of in my own mind going through it. So if one of my fears is I am bad, and I sit with that and I'm like, I am bad. I immediately can see all the ways in which I'm not, right? And I can, that's the opportunity to self-validate,
Evidence.
Right? It's like, okay, now, even if I really believe that, like on some level, my mind goes to looking for the parts of me that aren't. And then that's where I can actually put emphasis and attention on that and create more of that in my life.
But let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
What are you protecting, or who are you protecting by saying maybe I am bad? The coping mechanisms that you've created to not be bad, throw those out. Sit in the fact that maybe I'm bad. Who was right then? Who was right about me if I own the fact that I might be bad? Who are you protecting? What story are you protecting? See, that's the work, because if you find out who did that, then you're going to have to look into the truth of what is really going on.
Right. Yeah, because why do we protect certain people in that way, where we almost want them to, like, is it protecting that story that we accepted from them, or that they have, we think that they have about us? Or why do you think we protect certain people in that way?
It's protecting you from your power. Here's the thing. See, it goes to so many different levels. Let's just pretend it's your dad. I don't know. Let's just pretend. Dad told me I'm bad. Okay. Well, if dad was wrong about me being bad, then I have resentment for living under that rock for so long that I don't want to look at the fucking resentment. So I'm going to make dad right about me being partial. I can see why he'd say I was bad. But let's look at the reality. He's wrong about that. I'm not bad. But I see why he would want me to think that, so that I would get in alignment to fit the scenario that makes him feel safe, which is fitting in, right? We have to look at dad's wounding. So we protect the story so we don't have to do the wound work that's going to kill us, we think. But really, it sets us free. Like for years, I lived with the fact my mom doesn't understand me. They put me on Ritalin. They got it wrong. I was so resentful and hateful. And then I got to the point where I was like, I get why they did it. They did it because they were trying to help me fit a system that they thought was safe, but I'm above the fucking understanding of that. So they did the right thing that they thought they were doing, but it really, really hurt me. So now I'll just educate the world on how to not do that.
So important. I mean, it just goes back to they're just layers and layers. And a lot of us were like, I've healed that thing. And then you see there's like another layer to it, and then it goes deeper. And so many people, we're like, I can't believe this thing is coming up with my dad again. I thought I dealt with it. But I think that's part of the process, is recognizing you might really focus on one area of your life, and then there's always something like another. Peter Crone says life's always presenting us with the people and circumstances to show us where we're not healed. So
Yes.
if we want to know where we need to do the work, just people are like, oh, I have to do all of this. Like, I have to sit down and write everything out. No, just like go live your life, and life will present you with the circumstances and the people where you need to do the work. Just pay attention.
I'm going to tell you something awesome about that. That is so accurate. This past year, I think I healed one of my biggest patterns in the whole world, which is my father wound. And what's so funny is, you still have it when you're still attracting the same patterns and the same lessons, but they just get better and better and better. And then you get to the point of consciousness where you just blast it out and you're like, fuck it. It feels good, but I don't want this anymore. I don't want this anymore. So I'm going to go through the deep pain of getting rid of this thing that makes me feel comfortable so that I can see the truth and finally heal it. And so this is the thing with toxic relationships and trauma bonds, is many of us are in toxic relationships and trauma bonds because we still haven't healed the original wound with mom or dad. And when I healed my last trauma bond, I was like, holy shit. You start to take back all the power because you realize that that trauma bond is nothing more than a familiar pattern with either mom or dad that you're trying to heal, but you can't heal it with the trauma. You can't. You have to heal it outside of the trauma by saying, you know what? I don't want this false comfort. I want to be with myself and heal the original wound with dad or mom, not with this boyfriend or girlfriend. I really just want to heal it within myself so that I can recognize content, healthy love, because there's no push-pull anxiety, none of that shit. It doesn't feel like this ridiculous, crazy, oh my God. It doesn't feel like that. It feels more like, this feels nice. And it's consistent. And it's not push-pull, and it's not this weird roller coaster. It's kind of just chill, and it's not going anywhere. It becomes unconditional and safe. Whoa, what's that? Yeah. New feeling. The new feeling that everyone's afraid of because it's boring and it's not like, is actually the right feeling.
Peace.
Because you've healed your pattern.
Yeah, peace.
Peace.
It's so funny how, and I bet this is the same for you, so many of the students that come into my program and we talk about what is it that you really want, more times than not, they're not even saying, I want this house, or I want this relationship, or I want this job. It's, I want peace. Yeah. We've been at war within ourselves for so long.
We don't trust it. We don't trust it.
Yeah. Like,
because you can't accept peace outside of you unless you have inner peace. Let's just be real. It would feel uncomfortable and strange, like something is not congruent here.
Right.
You have to find the peace within. And what that means is, I'm being totally honest. I'm not resisting. When you're laying in bed, you're like, I'm in the right relationship. It's so funny when you said that, because I'm like, I really get what you're saying. You can say, you know what? Maybe I'm not. What if I'm not? And being fine with that. That becomes inner peace, because you're like, I'm not resisting anything that is.
Yeah. And it's our own judgment that comes in and tells us, that's wrong. If I'm not in the right relationship, now there's all of this judgment that comes in. So there is this process of becoming aware, of really accepting where we are, accepting that all of our judgment is just the story and the conditioning that likely we've been like programmed into us, that it's wrong to date multiple people. It's wrong to get a divorce. It's wrong to change your mind, right? That we have to pick something and stick with it forever.
Let me tell you something about this divorce. I had a client that said to me, I loved this question. I hope somebody else hears this and was like, oh my God. This one client said to me, don't you regret ever getting married since it didn't work out? And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's the fucking best thing I ever did was get married. I loved being married. I had a great supportive marriage for a few years until we went in other directions and I realized our karma's complete. And now we're going to be much happier people not together. But society says divorce is wrong. I say it's awesome. If you're going to be happier not together and you're going to fulfill your potential not together, then that is a smart, responsible decision to say, you know what? We love each other, but bye.
Yeah.
Wow. When my client was like, well, you didn't get it right. I'm like, yes, I did. Mm-hmm. It was totally right. And it was amazing. And I became this and he became that. And now our becomings, we can go in other directions. Right. And thank you so much. Goodbye. Like, why is that negative? Because we're supposed to get it perfect at the beginning. How much pressure is that?
Yeah.
And by the way, everything is perfection in the process. So how can we say something that was so beautiful back then is wrong because it didn't end up a certain way? What is that fairy tale bullshit?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's Marianne Williamson in A Course in Miracles talking about how relationships are assignments. And if I've learned the lessons that this assignment was meant to teach me, it was a success, period.
Yes, 100%. I agree. So many people asked me when I was getting a divorce, don't you feel like a failure? I'm like, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. I think I did everything possible to make this work and it's not gonna. So I'm surrendering and I'm much happier now. Mm-hmm. So how is that bad if I like who I am so much now? Mm. And I'm sure he does too. Like, how is that bad?
Well, I think it just is a reflection of more of the person who's asking that question and their own fear within themselves.
Perfectionism, yeah.
Right. Because our questions reveal so much about us. It can reveal our own wisdom, but also our deep fears that we're just projecting onto you or whoever else. So I love that you just can stand in that, like that clarity and that confidence of moving forward and saying, hey, what's done is done and this is complete. And I've learned what I needed to. We have taken what we need and we're better because of it. And that's the purpose of relationships with all of us, whether we're with our parents, we're all here to teach each other lessons. And we have these sacred contracts with each other to learn. We're here to learn. This is school. I believe it, that all of this is life school.
Yeah, it is. And just to circle back to the beginning, you asked me the difference between, codependency and connection and attachment, all of that. My big thing is, why does a breakup have to be negative? It's because there's an attachment. It's like, what are you attached to? You need this person for a part of your own self-esteem. Like, we have to learn to love freely, where it's like, you're not my possession.
Right.
Okay. That's the first thing.
Yeah. Well, and the last piece on this is that relationships are eternal. Like, we aren't just physical beings. We're energetic beings, and the connections that we make, those things we tend to do life together over, this likely, it might not be the first time, especially if you have a deep connection, deep attachment with someone. There's a deeper spiritual connection, and that doesn't end because a relationship ends in this physical form. Like, those things will carry on. And that has helped me so much, especially in losing loved ones and losing people very close to me. It's like, it's not the end. This will continue, and we will continue to assist in each other's journeys in different ways. And it just evolves, and it gets to look different than it did before. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review or a rating, or take a screenshot and tag us on social media so we can celebrate and acknowledge any takeaways that you have. Thank you, as always, for being here and being an active participant in the Coachable community and listener every single week. I love you. Go out and be coachable this week. I'll see you next time on the Coachable podcast.